brief overview of just kind of what digital media means to the community at large before I get going with the presentation that you see on the screen. This is similar to a webinar that I gave previously, this CPF conference. So as you know, and probably part of the reason why you joined today, the way that people are accessing digital information is changing. I know Ralph will give you some stats when he gets to his presentation, but we're obviously seeing trends towards smartphones and other overuse of computers. Tablets are also still a very important use. In 2013, according to CNN, PCs saw their worst decline in history. Smartphones increased by 39% that same year. I looked up some stats this morning. Just this past Friday, with Black Friday, there was a 21% increase in mobile app digital sales, and that's just in 1 year's time. So one of the other things they noted is that 45% of that traffic was via a smartphone, and so the smartphones exceeded tablets, and they exceeded PCs. So that one thing, just that one thing, sort of changing how we access information and interact with our digital community has impacted other areas as well. New data from app analytics provider Flurry in 2014 stated that app usage on smartphones is continuing to grow at the expense of the mobile web. So between 2013 and 2014, mobile web usage, which means that sort of browsing on Safari or Google on your phone, has dropped from 20 to 14%, about 22 minutes per day, whereas mobile app usage accounts for 2 hours and 19 minutes of smartphone use. So just to reference those of you who were at the CPF conference, former SHPA Wayne Donaldson was the keynote presenter, and he gave an impassioned presentation about why it's important to include youth in your efforts to reach out to the community, the historic preservation community, and the community at large. And so I think it's important to note that this data has an obvious correlation with how you are involving youth in your programs in the community. So we've also seen with the National Trust and the way that they've kind of rebranded some of their outreach efforts with This Place Matters and History Matters, that those two are sort of geared towards a new type of learning information, reaching out to the community in a new way. So some other things to mention. I saw at the National Trust Conference some years ago, think tank Kent Smith. She actually talked about how those who were born since the internet existed, and for those of you who might be on the call, it's going to probably include your kids, that they actually think differently than those of us who were born before, which includes myself. So, and I think that's just a fascinating idea. They literally think differently. And so what that means is those of us who were born before the dawn of the internet still tend to think fairly linearly. A follows B, which leads to C, and is followed by D, and sometimes goes to E and on to F, etc. Whereas those who came up after the internet, which would include millennials, likely children that those of us in this chat room have had, they think differently. They think in a bubble diagram. And so Kennedy Smith actually referenced the way that you see Sesame Street organizing their shows is actually an example of this. So instead of ABC methodology, that you might be used to, they'll do kind of more bubble diagramish. So they'll pick a letter of the day is B, and then B is the color blue, and then we're going to travel to Bolivia and see what that's like. And so it's kind of this more scattershot of thinking with common ties versus a progression. And so keeping that in mind, today's Gen Xers count for about 55 million, and I'm included in that group. By 2036, there will be 81.1 millennials, far exceeding the Gen Xers, like 1.5 times. And this is important because the boomers were really the biggest generation to date. The percentage of boomers also exceeds Gen Xers. So, the millennials will really be a fairly large portion of our population by 2036. And so just in thinking about how youth and millennials and folks in general interact with their smartphone, here's just a tad more statistics before I get into my presentation. In an article from Mobile Social Work in 2013, they were talking about youth behavior, and this is kind of going to get to what I'm talking about with storytelling a little bit later. 81% of youth under 25 sleep with their phone next to them on the bed. 74% reach for their smartphones immediately after waking up. And so this, it might sound a bit like a technology addiction, but research shows that it's not the phones themselves that are addicting, but what those phones, do for them in the way that it leads to access of information. And further, the studies on this age group demonstrated that their online behavior and interaction online actually doesn't have a lot of meaning unless it's tied to later face-to-face communication. So 67% of the same group preferred face-to-face communication ahead of voice calls, texting, and social media, which I think is actually revealing. I think most of us, our impression would be otherwise. So I just want you to keep that kind of framework in mind when you're hearing this presentation today, because certainly digital media and mobile app usage isn't going away. It's only increasing, and will in fact be a defining method for obtaining information. In that same article, it says that young people prefer face-to-face communication for influencing decisions, and they trust family and friends over social media. So sort of building these trust relationships, is also the key. So with that, I'm going to get going with my presentation. And I'm going to skip through the first part very quickly because I think most of you are fairly familiar with Riverside. But just in case you're not, we're a mid-sized city, about 300,000 residents. We are, however, the largest city in our area, which is called the Inland Empire. And we're the fourth largest inland city after Fresno, Sacramento, and Bakersfield. We're located about 60 miles east of Los Angeles, but we don't like to be considered a suburb of Los Angeles. Please don't say that. We're the 59th most populous city in the United States and 12th in California. There we are. And here we are in the county of Riverside, which is a fairly large county. San Bernardino to the north is slightly larger, but you can see we're in the more populated area there to the west, closer to Orange County, and there's a pretty picture of our downtown. You may know we're an older city, founded in 1895. Most notably, we are the birthplace of Sunkist, and the parent naval orange tree still exists here today. And we actually had the highest per capita income in the country because we've done a really good job of marketing our city to wealthy East Coasters who came here and developed their orange groves. We're currently known as the City of Arts and Innovation. We actually rebranded ourselves that way about 10 years ago. We decided we didn't want other people defining who we were, which had been happening in Riverside for a while, but that we wanted to be in control of what the message was that we were sending out, and so we came up with this new brand. Since then, we've named the most intelligent city in the world for our public access to internet and infrastructure. We also have the top 10 of the happiest young professionals, also for some of our local restaurants, our plethora of local restaurants, or I should say locally owned restaurants. But many of these things you can see on the screen are things that we've worked really hard to achieve in the last few days. We just had our holiday lighting kickoff last Friday, and it was the highest ever attended because we've been recognized now by USA Today. We have a really engaged community, and a lot of these awards that you see up here are because of that engaged community that has gone online and interacted in polls and whatnot to get Riverside votes and recognition for some of these things. So we actually also have a history of innovation. We used to process, when we processed citrus, we actually had really creative machinery that was developed here in Riverside. This building that you see actually has two reasons it's historic. It also was where they used to assemble the tank that you can see down here, which is an amphibious vehicle. It's credited maybe with winning World War II. I've heard a little bit of conflicting feedback on that. We have over 3,000 historically significant properties that are either individually designated or in a district, 13 districts, over 120 landmarks. I actually think that's closer to 130 by now, and 1,000 plus structures of merit. We have your typical kind of Southern California historic districts. This is a contributor to the Wood Streets, arguably our most successful historic district in town. We consist of about 26 neighborhoods, and part of what I'm talking about today with storytelling will include a discussion on our neighborhoods program. We also have a fairly vibrant downtown historic district known as the Mission Inn Historic District, with Mission Inn obviously being one of our cornerstone, almost signature iconic buildings in Riverside. But this is our historic city hall located across the street from it. And so I just want to give you that kind of framework to understand why we've implemented some of these programs, whether it be digital media or in storytelling. Because here's the reality of our program. Many of our neighborhoods here in Riverside are popular, but highly transitional. So we have a lot of turnover in housing, whether it's because of the rentals in the area or because of buying and selling. We did not have a lot of new landmarks coming in, except the incentivization through the Mills Act program. And even since I gave this presentation before, we've seen an uptick because of our Historic Preservation Fund program, that those seem to be the drivers for getting designated. We also noticed that diverse sites were just not being represented. We were asked by the state to see if we had a Latino context site here that we wanted to nominate for the National Register. And in our current designation, we had 0 that had a tie to any of our Latino contexts, which is actually quite significant here. Most of our landmarks were primarily architect and design related. Most of them had been designated in the 80s and 90s. But one thing we noticed, we've had a number of controversial projects come up, and modernism related sites and diverse related sites brought about more diverse interest and participation from the public, and we were touching new people that we just hadn't seen be involved or even show up at a public hearing before. And so we knew that a new type of media and approach was needed. We also knew that we needed to elevate the status of what it meant to be a landmark, because frankly, I think a lot of people didn't think that meant too much, or that it didn't have a sort of appeal to a broader audience. And mostly a lot of what we were doing, while we had a great solid historic preservation program, it needed some element of fun. So one of the first things that we did, and this is actually part of a grant that we got from the state through the SHPO office, was we did the Japanese American context citywide to help identify sites, and we created a podcast that you can see now online, because we knew that there was a much broader audience outside of our immediate area, even outside of California, that was interested in the Harada House and the story related to that. Really quickly, for those of you who don't know, the Harada House was a house that was owned by a Japanese-born man named Jukichi Harada. And he actually couldn't own it because of the alien land law. So he purchased the house in the name of his American-born children, and it was legally challenged. And he succeeded in keeping it in his children's name, and that became a landmark case in the state of California. And many other people sort of copied that role model as a way to purchase property in the United States. In California specifically. So we created a podcast as kind of a way to take people on a virtual tour of all the sites related not only to the Harada House and that landmark case, but the Japanese American context in the city of Riverside. And this was actually funded with SHPO grant funds. One of the other things that we've done is a TV show that's called Historic Destinations. This is just a screen grab of where you can see those on our website. So I believe we've done about 9 or 10 TV shows. It's meant to be kind of a behind-the-scenes type of tour of a building, something that as a member of the public you couldn't just walk up and do on your own. So you're getting unique information in these tours. We do an interview with somebody who's related to the site and knows a lot about the site, and I think they're typically about 18 minutes. We have a channel called GTV here in Riverside. Riverside is actually the largest metropolitan area in the United States not served by a television channel, and so to fill that gap, we've created our own, which is known as GTV. And so Historic Destinations is a show that shows on there regularly, and I'm really surprised by how many people have seen the show and know about these buildings, just as a result of this show. And frankly, how many people enjoy watching this GTV channel. So this is something that's been a really successful method for just continued outreach, and it plays periodically. It's not just a one-time thing playing on GTV. We also had an award-winning database. Now, if any of you are familiar with the Riverside database, this award-winningness was actually from the early 90s. But this is a snapshot of what it still looks like. We're interested in moving beyond that and watching some of the other examples. But at the time that this was done, also funded with SHPO money, we were award-winning for this database. As we started noticing the last few years, these sort of continued questions that come in from the fourth graders as they're doing history, or people wanting to get more information on where historic buildings and districts were, we were able to quickly and the important thing about this example is this is just an interactive Google map. We were able to do this for free. One of my interns did this in about a week's time, and she worked part-time, just entering the address, location, and other GIS type of information on all of these sites. And then she was able to link them back to that database, which has gotten a little bit clunky. And you can click on each of these when you're actually interacting with it online and pull up information on each of these projects. And so this is kind of the precursor to one of the projects that we'll show you coming up and Ralph will also speak about. But this right here is something you can implement quickly in your city without a lot of know-how, certainly no expense, to give people a quick access in map format to your information on your historic sites. I mentioned before that we wanted to elevate what it meant to be a landmark, and that map back there showed you how many landmarks we had. We're also working on kind of creating uplifting the status of what it means to be a landmark in the city. And so this right here, which is our first edition, we did a really small printing, and we're looking to do a larger printing hopefully in the next year, is called Riverside's Landmark Legacy, and it is a coffee table style book that features all of the city's landmarks. We were able to work with our Arts and Cultural Affairs department, and they provided the funding for the architectural photographer who went out and took pictures of all these buildings. And my direction to them was to take pictures that make people want to go there. Because if you look at our pictures on our database, they may look just like yours. They're either from 1979 or we did a follow-up in 1990. They're fairly clinical and technical, and they're not inviting or something that would make people want to go there. And we wanted to change that paradigm with this book. Right here is our landing page on the city's website of all the maps that we do. As a precursor to the Riverside Landmarks app, there was an app created by the mayor's department called the Riverside Tour Guide. But this is kind of nice to have a landing page that shows all the departments, and what their offerings are for mobile apps. The quick thing I wanted to mention with this was we found out when we started pursuing our grant, which Riverside Landmarks app, which Ralph will be talking about, that the mayor's office was already in the works with this Riverside Tour Guide, and so we actually found a way to work together. And so one of the reasons I wanted to mention this is when you start working on an app related to cultural resources, make sure you look in your jurisdiction to see what else is out there and how you can work together and possibly share access to information and or advertise each other's or make it easy to get on each other's apps on your app. So here's a quick snapshot of the Riverside Tour Guide. Our Main Street Mall in downtown Riverside, which is a street that's been closed and turned into a pedestrian mall, actually has several statues and gifts that have been given to the city by various sister cities over the years. And so this app now, you can download it and you can walk through the Main Street Mall, and it will tell you history about these statues and other things that you might see. I think now public art is included in there, and it's done in multiple languages, and it's also done using geofencing, which means you can turn the program on, and then if you leave it on, it will push that information to you as you get closer to it while you're walking. So you don't actually have to click on each thing. It will actually just give you that information automatically. This right here is our Riverside Landmarks app, which we also funded with a state preservation grant. Ralph is going to get into this in a lot more detail, but this was using a lot of the same photography that we used for that book that I showed you. So it's high quality photography that would make you want to go to the structure, rather than kind of using these more technical, maybe black and white photos. It's meant to just be kind of surface level information. Admittedly, when I first met with Maven, I wanted everything in there but the kitchen sink, because that's what you want to give all the information you can, and they really kind of pulled me back and taught me how to, think really simply. What's the basic information you want people to go so that they'll continue to use the program and learn about the buildings? And if they want to dig deeper, they can do that. But it doesn't have to. Everything doesn't have to be on the app. The app does not save the world. It just gives you, some key information and good high-quality photographs about the building. So one of the things that we're thinking of adding, just in thinking of the app as it grows in popularity, which we're hoping it will do, is to do sort of featured walks. So some of the featured walks that we're thinking about doing is a Riverside Cultural Trail, which is a walking trail that would go through downtown and connect the downtown area to some key cultural sites in its immediate proximity. We have a couple of downtown walking tours that are architectural based or theme based. Within the Japanese American context I mentioned, there's actually a small walking tour you could do downtown that includes a number of the sites. We're also thinking about doing biking tours that overlap with cultural resources. We have a pretty strong bike community in Riverside, and they do regular bike tours. And so we're kind of interested in how we could work with them to create ones that people might be able to do on their own. I left this QR codes up here, and I know as I've talked to Ralph, I'm not sure what the future of QR codes are, but it is still a pretty easy information access tool. And so if it does continue to be popular in usage, we want to see how to incorporate that perhaps into what our app does, and or, do we want to provide QR codes for the historic buildings downtown so as people are walking by, they can snap the QR code and get more information on the building. Just ways that we can connect with a regular pedestrian that's walking through our downtown. We're also looking to connect with some of the podcasts that you saw and or the digital television programs that we had with Riverside Historic Destinations, so that as you pull up the building, you can see other information and linking that you could possibly link to. But again, our app didn't solve the world, and it doesn't have everything but the kitchen sink. So, these are things we might think about in the future as technology improves. And then lastly, I've started to see some then and now, some pretty cool then and now photographs showing then and now. I know History Pin does some of that. And so, in the future, our thoughts are that three-dimensional renderings and virtual travel might be possible. And so, in summary, this is just the digital media portion. I'm going to talk briefly about storytelling. It looks like I'm running a little bit over time, so I'm going to speed up just a little bit. But the Google Map and database that I mentioned are, in fact, free. You do need to have a database that has all that information in it in order to make that happen quickly. Ralph is going to talk about the Landmark App open source software, which is also part of our grant, and this is actually free, and some of you are going to be able to use it at your city if you want to have that app be in your city as well. You're going to need some technical knowledge. And then History Pin, which I'll talk about actually briefly in the next section, does have a contracted annual fee and a little technical knowledge needed. So with the Riverside Storytelling Project, and this is a kickoff for a small bit about storytelling, we had an RFP that we put out. This was actually utilizing city funds to do citywide storytelling. And this is kind of based on the story core concept that you've seen, trying to get people to interact with a map and digital storytelling. And then we actually set up some booths, which I'll show you at some of our neighborhood events. So History Pin does have a fee associated with it, but it also has another way that you can kind of interact with it. And so this is our Riverside Storytelling landing page. And you can see we've deliberately tried to make the banner at the top sort of fun and appealable to a younger sort of audience. One of the other things that we did was we connected with our Neighborhoods program. So our Neighborhoods program is also in our division. And they are currently utilizing asset-based community development. And so for those of you who are familiar with that, it's a concept of looking at what your existing assets are and how they can inform and assist in the community versus looking at what your deficits are. So rather than saying we don't have this and we don't have this and we need this and we need that, this is saying, hey, here's something we already have, and how can we either give this thing more resources to provide more for the community, or maybe if we just focus on assets, you will take care of needs and deficits. And so this is a good example of how our Neighborhoods program started to impact our historic preservation program through information and influence. And it became pretty obvious to me quickly that the neighborhoods program actually touches a lot of things that we care about in historic preservation. When I'm talking to somebody on the phone about why they should care about the character of their historic building, a lot of times it's for these reasons, because I love my neighborhood, and I love my neighborhood because I love the trees, or I find it peaceful, or it's filled with culture. And a lot of what we're doing with the Secretary of Interior standards and guidelines that we have is actually preserving that sort of look and feel. And that is, city love. That's neighborhood love. It's, things about why people are drawn to a place, and maybe they just don't understand that it's, because the building has wood windows, or, that every house on the street has wood windows in a similar setback. To them, it's maybe more of these kinds of, tangible things. Like, I like that my street has trees on it, not that they're necessarily historic trees. We also wanted to focus that history in Riverside is everybody's history, that everyone has something to contribute to this history in Riverside, and that it's everybody's story. And so our storytelling mission was broad, and that actually made some challenges, but we wanted to make everybody feel like they were part of it, whether they'd lived here their whole lives, or their families had lived here for several generations, or whether they were new and recently transplanted here. There was a part of Riverside's history that was for them. So some of the other things that we've done as part of this storytelling ideas, we created a landmark class that we taught at a local elementary school. These are some of the final projects that the kids did, where we did walkabouts in a neighborhood that had just a plethora of architectural styles and landmarks. We taught them what it meant to be a landmark in the city, and so you can see some of the evidence of what they learned here. We gave them all their own little disposable camera. I don't know why that image isn't showing up, but we also created this brand called Neighborfest. And Neighborfest is a neighborhood conference that's been turned more into festival style. So rather than sitting in a seminar all day, we created booths where people could learn various topics at the booths and made it feel like a festival, as opposed to kind of like a lecture that was, more sitting in chairs and listening. So here's an example of where we worked with the Neighborhoods program. So I mentioned that we had this storytelling project, and we actually worked with Neighborfest. So you can see this is a Neighborfest banner up here, to have a storytelling booth where we were actually collecting information and inputting it directly into HistoryPin. So our Neighborhoods program and our Historic Preservation program worked very closely together here. And I think that was just a wonderful benefit. So something that we want to do to continue to expand our storytelling mission is we want to add more oral history components. We want to figure out how to capture, we want to be able to have kind of our own mobile storytelling booth, much like StoryCorps. We also are interested in collecting what sort of themes might be associated with this broad reach of storytelling citywide, and how we can integrate the storytelling project more into our already existing programs like community events, Mayor's Night Out. And then lastly, we want to establish more partnering with existing programs. We have a lot of universities in this area, and a lot of them have radio programming, and so we're interested in how we can tie our oral history programs into what local radio is doing, and also with our local digital labs and museums. And so I believe that. And so just the last thing to mention, constantly be on the lookout for potential partnerships. I mean, I think all of us, if you work for a jurisdiction, you're strapped on resources. Look for other groups that are doing things that are similar to what you're doing. So we established the HP Ambassadors program here, which is very similar to a neighborhood leadership academy. We haven't kicked it off yet, but what we're hoping we're going to see is creating some neighborhood leaders that are going to advocate for buildings. So it's not just always the staff that are talking about why historic preservation is important here. We found out when we got out there and started doing our storytelling project that there's a group in town called the Memoir Club, which is a bunch of ladies that get together at various senior centers around town and share memoirs and memories. What a great asset that was to learn about. I think it goes without saying that you should be partnering with your local HP organizations, museums, and libraries. But looking for potential social media partnerships as well. And making sure if you have a downtown partnership, you're working with them. And so with that, I know I've gone over. Thank you. Keep it fun. I'll be here to answer questions later.
Okay, Ralph, I think you're ready to begin. I have your PowerPoint pulled up right now.
Okay, can you hear me, Jonathan? I lost my
Yes,
audio
yeah.
for a second. All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My portion of the presentation is pretty brief. The purpose of this part of the presentation is really to introduce you to some free open source software that you can use to create a mobile app for your community and allow you to share your historical landmarks. So I'm going to just really cover 4 points. We're going to talk a little bit about the app that we developed in partnership with Aaron and the city of Riverside. I'll touch briefly on why mobile. I think Aaron actually made a pretty good case already why you should be thinking about mobile, specifically mobile apps. Give you a real quick introduction to the open source portion of the project, and then share a couple of ideas and tips at the end before we get into Q&A. Just a little bit about me. You can follow me on Twitter. I consider myself a tech entrepreneur. One of my companies where we actually do work with clients is called Maven, and we're a digital growth consultancy. So we focus on not just building software and applications for our clients, but really helping them to grow. And we are located in beautiful downtown Riverside, and it's actually all lit up this time of year for the Festival of Lights. It's amazing. And just to share with you some of our accomplishments, or at least one of our accomplishments, we are a Gold Award-winning agency, and the award we won last year at the American Advertising Awards was actually for another project we did with the city of Riverside for their Economic Development Department website. So we're very proud of that, and to have the opportunity to work with Erin and her team and her colleagues on those two projects. So let's talk about the landmark project. I mentioned, we want to just give some credit to the National Park Service, the California Office of Historic Preservation, the City of Riverside, and Maven. This actually was a partnership project where you had multiple organizations coming together to make this happen. And the purpose of this was really to allow every city to have the opportunity to share the historical landmarks that you may have, and really find a way to kind of spread out or to sort of defray some of the costs that make that happen. So this project is an open source project. That's actually the portion project we worked on first before we actually delivered the app. And there were a couple of challenges that we talked about before we got started. Number one, how do we catalog local landmarks on the internet? And we decided mobile was going to be the best way to do that. How do we keep it simple for users to access the information? How can we minimize development expenses? And how can we streamline the process so that our other organizations, like maybe your city, could actually maybe repeat the process? So those are some of the questions that we felt we addressed with this project. All right, so let's have a quick look at the app. I've just got maybe 2 or 3 screenshots. I am probably at the end of the presentation just going to put a couple of website links in that you can click on and go take a look at some of this. This app actually is available now in the App Store, so you can download that at the end of the presentation. So here's what it looks like. When you open up the app, you're going to just see a very simple design. We really believe that less is more, so we work pretty hard to keep it really simple for the user to find historical landmarks. And in this opening screen, you can actually see, you can actually search by location or by alphabet. So you can actually sort in 2 different ways. If you pull down just a little bit, there's actually a little option where you can search by the name of the historical landmark if you know that. And then if you click on any one of these sort of sections here, you're going to go to the next screen, which is going to give you the details about that landmark. And you can get sort of the name of it and a little overview. And just here at the bottom, there are some other little buttons that you can click This one, I think if you click that, will give you additional pictures of that location. You can get like audio and video, and then you can also click here to kind of find where that location is on the map. So it's really simple. I mean, that's pretty much it, except we have, you know, maybe a couple of hundred landmarks in the database that you can kind of explore. And I've actually the opportunity to meet a few real estate agents and some other people that, you know, they're pretty excited about it. There's people in downtown Riverside who are actually using this app to discover locations and maybe share them with their friends. All right, so this is the website that we set up. This is where you can go. I'll put the link in the chat box at the end where you can actually go and download the app. It is available in both the App Store for Apple and the Google Play Store. And here's the link for that. So Aaron already actually, I think, did a really good job of talking about why mobile. You know, some of you may be familiar with Mobilegeddon, which is where Google made a big announcement that, you know, your website had to be mobile friendly, or they were gonna, you know, really they were gonna give you a pretty rough time with your search engine rankings if you did not make your website mobile friendly. And part of that is this is probably a less up-to-date statistics that Erin gave at the beginning of her presentation, but you can see a strong trend from 2013 to 2014 with mobile, and a lot of that is actually being driven by mobile app usage. So you see a strong decline in desktop, which is continued. That trend is going to continue. So really, the point here is just to encourage you when you're thinking about putting this information out online and putting your databases together. You want to think mobile first. It really should be a part of your thought process and your strategy. All right, so what I wanted to introduce you really right now to the Landmark project. And really, this is that free open source tool that we talked to you about. And when I say free, I want to be a little bit more specific. It's actually all of the code that you need to get started is free. You may have some expense depending on the skill sets within your city to actually get you up and running. I'll touch on that later, but you will need some help to start to complete the development process. But this will give you a huge head start. And if you have certain talents in-house, it actually may not cost you anything to get that up and running. So you want to go to the Landmark website, and it's getlandmarkproject.com. Make a note of that. I'll put that again in the chat box at the end. But this is where your technical and design team can go to actually download all the code, begin to play around with it, and get the process started. And the open source software is going to really include two main features. Number one, you're going to get an easy-to-use content management system, and you're going to get a pre-built app where you can kind of focus on more of just the design and putting a skin on it to make it unique to you, and you don't have to start from scratch. And you know, starting a mobile app from scratch can be really expensive, so this gives you an awesome head start. All right, so this is just a screenshot of what the content management system looks like. We actually tried to. You'll have a list of landmarks. You can click edit, and you can key all your information into sort of some pre-agreed forms that we have set up. You can upload some images, and you hit a button, and then it's automatically in your app. It's really easy to use. I think we spent maybe 30 minutes training the city of Riverside how to use it, and they're able to log in and update that on a continual basis. Just a couple of examples. This is just a couple of the screenshots from the website that you can go ahead and take a look at. We do have a support page, I'll mention. The idea for this project is that as other cities continue to implement it and implement and use the software, that we would begin to develop a bit of a community, and Maven, we would kind of, I guess, steer that. But as we develop features, we will be rolling those features out onto the open source platform to make it available for everybody to use. So feel free to reach out to us. We're here and available to help. All right, so I just wanted to have a couple of other examples just to give you some ideas on how you might use it. Here's another idea that we came up with for the Riverside Parks. You'll see that the construction is somewhat similar, where you can have a list of parks, and then you can drill down into each individual park, learn a little bit more about it, see what amenities they have available. Here's another idea we put together. This actually is an app that we launched using a similar base of code, but it allows you to find hydrogen fueling stations in your area. And this is just hit the App Store about a week ago, called Zero Up. And here's another example of, this one is not in the App Store. This is just an idea. This is like an apartment finder where you would find luxury apartments in your area and be able to sort them by price and other criteria. And once again, you could drill down into them to get additional details. So this is really great. This is a really great tool if you have sort of a list of a database of different landmarks or locations, and you want to get a little bit more information about each one and be able to search it and find it by distance and that sort of thing. All right, so just a couple of tips. If you're going to try to get a project going in your city, one of the things we recommend that doesn't take a lot of time is to begin by doing a sketch, just getting some ideas going, and then hiring a designer to design around the capabilities of the application that the open source software we have available. It's really great if you can kind of put a design together and circulate it within your organization to sort of build some consensus and build excitement about the project. We find even with our clients that just putting some designs together really goes a long way and doesn't really cost you a lot to do that. You can put designs together for apps sometimes in only a couple of days. Most of the time spent is really in the implementation and the coding. And then another tip is, and I mentioned this before, you will need some help. This is what the technology stack does look like for the app we developed. You're going to need someone who's familiar with Node.js, MongoDB, Ionic Framework, Apache Cordova. Don't feel threatened by those languages. Just find somebody who can help you with that. But the cool thing is, once you get your app set up, you can roll that out across multiple device types without having to start from scratch. So this software allows you to roll it out to iPhone, Android, Amazon Fire, Windows Phone, BlackBerry. I think currently we've done the first two, but we could extend and make it available across other platforms as we go. And then my final little tip is, once you have everything set up and you roll it out, don't forget to have a marketing plan where you're using social media and a landing page similar to the one we showed you earlier. Use the App Store to market. You may want to maybe take some ads out on Facebook and Instagram. There's great places to actually market apps and get people to download it so that you can share it with the community. All right, so that's the end of my presentation. I think we're doing question and answer at the end of all three presentations. But thank you for attending and thank you for listening.
Excuse me. Thank you, Ralph. I'm going to mute you right now. I think we have somebody else in the room who's on the phone, so I'm going to very quickly mute everybody. I'll be right back. Okay. And just a heads up, my webcam went out, so you won't be able to see me, but I'm sure you can hear me. If you have any issues or questions in the meantime, you can type them in the chat box at the top left-hand side. And what I wanted to do today, as somebody who's with a nonprofit organization who often operates on a much larger or smaller budget, I would say, is talk about what you can do with a small staff as an advocacy group to reach out to your constituents and the people that you'd like to communicate with, and also to get the community to curate and have input on sites. And as a statewide organization, we are often short-staffed, but we have a lot of interesting projects we'd like to do. This is something that I took up on my own time and wanted to do. But what I'll do today is kind of go through two case examples, talk about what I've done in the past to make use of the open source tools that Ralph has been talking about, and what's possible with what's out there. So, you know, the title of this webinar really starts with GeoMashup, and I'm sure a lot of people don't know what a GeoMashup is. It's really just a mixture of different mapping data sources, and it's usually gleaned from publicly available information. It could include different types of maps, historic maps. It could have layering. It could have sources from Wikipedia, from archive.org, from Google Books. You can pull together a lot of different types of information. It's up to you. Kind of the sky's the limit. But what we're really interested in as preservation organizations is working with the public. You know, what is public history, and figuring out what the public is interested in, what piques their interest, what they'd like to share with their communities. And the framework that Ralph was kind of mentioning really also allows for community curation and input. The portion that he talked about, the content management system, allows for people to make changes to what's out there and kind of share their own memories. And that's also something that Erin sort of talked about in her presentation. This is just a screen cap of a project in Los Angeles by Dolores Hayden, The Power of Place. It kind of shows the way people, the community thinks in terms of mapping. What is their map? What makes a place important to them? And it may not be a scientifically accurate map, but it also has a lot of information in it. So what's possible, you know, with the tools that are out there right now? Almost anybody with a little bit of expertise, a little bit of learning, a little bit of self-training can develop things like heat maps, like maps. They could cluster many thousands of points. They could do polygons to illustrate the footprints of buildings. They could layer different sources and do transparencies or semi-transparencies. And they can have a dynamic website that is updated, curated by the public. A lot of that is what Erin spoke about. History Pin does that very, very well, and it's a great option for a lot of cities. When we're talking about heat maps, we're talking about density, you know, and density is a way to show important sites in a community. This right here is Holyoke, Massachusetts. It's where I did my graduate research, and density heat maps allow you to identify these hotspots for historic buildings. You can examine changes over time. You can look at demolition, places where demolition are especially rampant. You can look at building permits and infill development, new construction where communities are being impacted in very real ways. You can look at Mills Act properties and National Register districts and see where they really cluster around in a city. You can also do route maps. And maps, this is an illustration of the streetcar system in Holyoke, Massachusetts in 1900. It's just a simple overlay in Google Earth. And route maps can also be used for you know, like the app that Ralph and Erin were talking about, historic walking tour routes. You can identify transportation corridors, view sheds, waypoints, and other features, and map historic sort of information, whether it's transportation or infrastructure. And I think one of the most powerful tools that you know, only recently kind of was made full use of was clustering. When you have many thousands and thousands of points, waypoints, clustering allows you to illustrate things and improve the speed of that illustration, because when you have thousands of waypoints, it impacts the processing speed of your computer. And I'll kind of go into that a bit more later because CPF is making use of it when we're illustrating 2,000 different National Register sites in the state. This here is an illustration of polygons in the city of New York. It illustrates the building age by color. So you'll see that the brighter colors are more modern buildings. The darker and red colors are older buildings going all the way back to 1830. It's a great way to determine exactly what the age of different neighborhoods in a city are. This is great use of polygons. And so now I'm going to talk a little bit about what it takes for a nonprofit organization with a staff of 3. Making use of volunteers is important. You know, what you're looking for is somebody that has computer science experience, whether they're a computer science major or they've done web development in the past. You need somebody that understands mapping APIs, some of the most commonly used mapping APIs, and API stands for, I think it's Advanced Programming Interface, but maybe Ralph can correct me. And you could use either Leaflet or the Google Maps API, both of which are free and open source and available. Most of these highlighted items are linked, so when we provide the PDF to you later, you can kind of click on them and explore later. HTML5 is just a responsive kind of web design. It allows some new features like geolocation. So whenever you open a site in the browser and it asks if you want to share your location, HTML5 is allowing that to happen. And that allows you to locate yourself within an area using your mobile device. PHP, which is a relatively older coding language, server-side coding language that interfaces with a database, and in this case what I've been using is MySQL, also an older database platform but also open source. And jQuery, which allows you to do responsive web design. It fits the screen of the size of your mobile device. The format of the data is formatted in either GeoXML, GeoRSS, or GeoJSON, and you can look into those later. But what you really need when you're developing something like this is data. You're looking for something that is in a friendly format for databases, which could be either an Excel file or CSS, and you need to geocode or georeference those locations. Google has an open source API that allows you to do that. So when you type in an address, a street address, it can automatically determine the coordinate, the UTM coordinates of that location. But there are many other ways to georeference and geocode places. And you should have some time. You know, if you want to build something like from scratch, you should expect at least 6 to 12 months. And so now I'll quickly go into 2 very brief case examples. The first arose out of some of my graduate level research. Holyoke, Massachusetts is a town that was once a population of upwards of 70,000 and has, like a small Detroit, it's become a population of about 20,000 in the span 40, 50 years. It's also one of the poorest, and it has the least access to state resources, and it's one of those cities that has a very vibrant, rich history, but really doesn't have the money to invest in things like this. So, you know, I volunteered to develop this for the city. It was a 3-month project. I was hoping to make it more community interactive, community curated, but given that it was 3 months, I wasn't able to do that portion of it. But what you'll see here in the demonstration, give me a second here. I'm going to share the application with hope it will work. Okay, so hopefully what you're seeing on your screen is the homepage for the Holyoke, Massachusetts walking tour. It was developed about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I guess. It was translated into Spanish, but with my limited knowledge, I'm hoping to engage with somebody who has a better understanding of Spanish. But for now, we'll go to the English portion of the website. What you see here is the first page of what the mashup is. Actually, it's landmarks in the city registered by the state. In the state of Massachusetts, they make their forms available online. They're digitized as PDF files, and the, the theme of each of these is each sort of corresponds to a different type of resource. So you have civic, commercial. The drop down allows you to kind of tour you're interested in or what's interested in seeing. For example, if you were only interested in civic sites, you click on the civic drop down. And to give you an example of what we're looking at here, or to kind of explain what you see here, is it's this layer, a colored overlay, referenced Sanborn map. And Sanborns were fire insurance maps from the early 1900s all the way until the 1970s. And they're often used in historical preservation. But this was overlaid on top of your Google map, and I can toggle this map off so you see the modern sort of look at what that place is like right now. You'll see in the middle of the screen the Holyoke City Hall, and then right up here is the vantage point where that photo was taken. When you click on the point, it shows you a before and after image of the City Hall. The after image was taken by me. The before image was taken in 1900 by a local photographer. But able to, using different photo editing tools, you can match them up almost exactly. This, using jQuery, is also allows you to sort of cycle through each image at your speed, at your own speed. The pause button. And on the bottom of the screen is a description of history and architecture for the site, taken directly from the state. There should be an icon there, but when you click up on that, it takes you to the actual form for that resource from the Massachusetts Cultural Resource Information System, and it goes into the full history of the site, setting its location, its kind of criteria, and all that stuff that preservation people are very familiar with. So that was a very brief sort of description of what the Holyoke project went into. I'm going to stop sharing this for now. Go back to the sorry, I had to restart the sound here. And then, so what we're looking at here, one second, is I have to pull up this presentation back. Okay, so on the back end of the History Walk project, there's really three things. One is the design, which is what you saw. The second is the function and visualization. You're looking at the kind of back end, what the layer looked like above the base map, and then finally the data and schema, which is what kind of leads everything within the map. And for those three things, you have HTML5 for the kind of design and function, or the look and feel of it. You have Google Fusion tables, which is actually a really easy, straightforward way to do it. That's really the database in this case. And then you have Google Maps and jQuery mobile. Here.
Sandbag go home. Oh, it's over.
Okay, so in the case of Holyoke, there were a bevy of historic information, historic photos to work with. Church. And so these are just sort of some of the features and functions that you see in that kind of application. These links are available for you later. I thought it was interesting that Aaron spoke earlier about QR codes because they do seem kind of dated now. But like she mentioned, they are a very important way to quickly access information without having to type in a web address or kind of actually find the information using a search. And then on the back end, like I mentioned, Google Fusion Tables is a free way of displaying georeferenced information, and Google Fusion actually georeferences for you. So if you look at pull up the arrow here, if you look at the coordinates here, those were taken from the street address, and Google turned those in georeference coordinates or points. It does all that work for you. All you have to do is import a list of the places with detail as you see fit, and then it'll find the coordinates for you. And then second, I really wanted to talk about what CPF is doing now. And this is not yet a public site. We're still kind of working out some extra features that we'd like to add to it. But really, it will start as a listing of all 2,000 National Register sites mapped and geolocated and illustrated for the state of California. There will be topographic maps for each site. You'll see to the right here a topographic map for one site, not National Register, but just located on the site. There are images for each location, and you can community members can add their own profiles. They can log in. This was all built from open source code. There's no cost to us, just quite a bit of time, and it can be moderated by administrators. People with admin sort of access can either edit, approve, or delete sites that are added if they need to. That system is known as User Cake. It's an older sort of user management system, but still very functional. And so the Places project adds a fourth feature on top of the Holyoke project, and that's crowdsourcing and curation, much like HistoryPin. And to do that, as I mentioned, you use User Cake. In the database, unlike Google Fusion Tables, is not MySQL, and MySQL has spatial features. And then, of course, the same sort of design features, HTML5 jQuery. And for the map, instead of Google Maps this time, you're using Leaflet and OpenMaps CalTopo tiles. So I'm going to quickly show you, and hopefully it won't turn off the sound this time, show you the initiative by CPF now. So CPF has not yet launched this page, so it's running locally on my own computer. But you'll see exactly how it appears as it stands. And as I mentioned earlier, you have a clustering. So each of these colored sort of dots on the screen are really a representation of multiple sites. And you can do things like customize. So what I've taken is a National Register plaque to identify the sites that are National Register sites. And any other sites added by community members are identified by a green pin for now. The map here is not Google Maps, as I mentioned, but it's OpenMaps, also the open source available map system. When you click on a site, let's do one down to Orange, for example. When you click on a site, you're given a full sort of background of its history. So here is the Irvine Bean and Growers Association building with the National Register ID. And this is sort of the profile page for that particular location. On the left, there is a movable topo map taken from CalTopo. Below it is a modern-day satellite screenshot from that location with a pin on it. On this link right here, right at the top right portion of the screen, you can click on that, and it takes you to a Google map of that particular location. And then the feature image above it on the top right is a slideshow one of the primary image from the National Register nomination form, and then second, a street view image of that same location. I'm not sure if this location is demolished now, but it could be just looking at the wrong side from Google Street View. Some of these need to be oriented to look straight towards the building. And then above it, have links that go both to the photos and the nomination form for the National Register ID. If this had a description associated with it, it would be below the address. And then on the back end, the admin system allows you to log in and configure users, give permissions to different users. You can edit the map. So here is a form to create a new location. You can add an image and upload an image, and it shows you a preview of that image, and add location information for that site. You can select, and at some point we're going to have all architectural styles here, but this is just for demonstration purposes. And you can type in the architect name, the year complete, a lot of different bits of information that aren't required but can be added. When you put in an address, it automatically shows you the right, but you can also drag that pin and change where it's located. Right above it, you'll see are the actual UTM decimal degree coordinates of that location, which is input into the database when you submit it. That just gives you a summary, place, and background. And it's now been added to the site, but it's a pending page. So if you'd like to administrate pages or approve pending sites, you can add them here. So that was a very quick demonstration of what we're working on here. There's a lot of other features that I wish I could go into more, but we are coming up on our question time, so I'll close out here quickly. Stop sharing this screen. So I wanted to thank everybody for today, and also thank all three of our speakers, I guess, including myself. Now is the time to ask questions. We have plenty of time, 15 minutes here for questions. So I'm going to hide this logo up here. On the top left-hand screen is a chat box, and as I mentioned earlier, if you're interested in speaking up and asking your question in person, you'll see a hand symbol there, and that way we know to enable your sound. So any questions? It looks like some people are about to type in some questions. And while we're doing that, I'm going to enable the sound for both of our other speakers. There's a question, Aaron, from Cindy. I think you can see it. Can you talk a bit about logistics and costs of setting up the story booths? And did you audio record or video record or get signed releases?
So we actually have done all of those things in various forms. The cost to set up the booths was part of the so like the signage and everything was part of the Neighborfest program, so that was funded through the neighborhoods program. So we didn't pay for the signage or the rental of the tables or the Easy Up or anything like that. We've done them 5 different times now as part of this Neighborfest outreach. Originally, when Neighborfest came up with these targeted learning tools that they wanted to have, they came up with the idea of storytelling. And we had just started our storytelling initiative, so we just, volunteered to be part of it and to actually have the HP program manage that storytelling booth. So that part was relatively easy. We did have a contract with ARG that is actually doing our storytelling program and helped create the History Pin site and has done a lot of the setup and outreach. That project is ongoing, so we did have a contract with them that was substantial, but it certainly is a program that could be done in-house if you had the staffing and time. We have not done a whole lot of audio recording at those storytelling events. We've used those storytelling booth events to kind of inform a list of people that we follow up with. And then we do more traditional oral histories in a room. They sign an audio release. We do video. We work with our GTV to do high quality video and recording that way. And we've probably done, I want to say, 5 of those so far. But like I said, this is an ongoing project. In the future, if we're able to do a StoryCorps booth traveling type of thing, we're going to have to face some of these questions, but we're just not there yet. I've met with our GTV to talk about how we might be able to do that, and the biggest challenge is having something portable that still gets high quality sound and video, and so that piece we just haven't solved yet.
Thank you. And I think a second question from the city of Campbell was, what has been the feedback from users? I think they're referring to the Riverside Landmarks app. And what have you had much feedback? And what has it been? I guess that's for both speakers.
Sure. I knew this question was going to come up, and so I appreciate you asking it. I would say at this point, the feedback we've gotten is that it's pretty easy to use. We want to do more promotion of the program so that we can get more feedback and see how it can become a more effective tool. I think we need to do more promotion in order to get more feedback.
Ralph, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would agree. Actually, we're currently in discussions to sort of do a major promotion of the app. Generally speaking, just from individuals that we have talked to that are actually using the app, most people are pretty excited about it. And a few people have actually mentioned to me that they kind of just, discovered it through the App Store. But we will be doing some more intentional promotion of the app. And so we'll be actually measuring, we have some ideas on how we'll be measuring feedback on the project as we actually get into the promotional phase of it.
Okay, great. The question from Melissa is, when is Places going live a best guess? And I think, it's really up to me because I'm the only person working on it at this point. And I think we'll be able to launch something that's relatively functional and live by probably spring of 2016. We're still working out some features that we'd like to have in it. And things like uploading recordings and videos I think would be nice. And it might be nice to release something that is functional early and then add some of these things later. Then the second question was, we are developing a website similar to the Places site for places and properties in Eureka. And are you aware of any mobile apps that could utilize our website data in a mobile form like the Landmark app? I think Ralph can probably speak to this too, but there are probably dozens of options out there. Some of them, most probably paid, and some are open source. The technical know-how is getting less and less challenging. So I think a lot of people out there can easily deploy an app with a little bit of pre-training and a little bit of learning on their own. But I think, Ralph, do you have anything to add to that? Do you know of any other options?
Yeah, I don't know of any other specific tools that you can get to kind of attach to the website data, but I will just just a quick word of advice. One of the things we did with the Landmark project is make sure that when we developed the content management system, we developed an API to go with that system. So the app actually talks to the API, which means that we could actually roll that same data out onto a website. So the city has the option to display that data in the app, on the website, or across different types of media. So I would say, Robert, that as you develop your website, talk to your technical team about what you need to do to extract the API and expose it so that when you want to consume that data with a mobile application that you can do that. So as long as you're prepared to do that, I think you can find some solutions that would be pretty easy to tie into.
Great. It looks like there's one more question coming in, and while that's happening, maybe I have a question for Aaron mainly because you might have knowledge of how people are using this and what's come into the Landmarks app. Are people able to submit their own locations, or are these strictly currently designated resources? Are you planning on having an option for people to submit the places that may not be designated but are important to them?
We're hoping to capture that data through the history pin program rather than the Landmark app right now, but I will tell you that our division, which includes neighborhoods and historic preservation and health, is redoing our website right now and just trying to create better vehicles by which to capture community input on various levels. So at this point, much like the book, it's really just trying to highlight landmarks in the landmark program, which we're trying to elevate. And those are really kind of some of our best examples, and we're looking to increase the amount. So it doesn't include all those other, thousands of structures of merit and district contributors. That kind of piece we will be figuring out, if there's a need for in the future, or if we just need to provide a better database. We've been watching the Getty program that's been implemented in Los Angeles, thinking about how we want to update our database, which is still that award-winning, although, award-winning in the early 90s database.
Great. There's a question for Ralph now. If you could talk more about how your mobile app helps with field survey and data collection. Maybe this is for both actually, but Connie is asking if she's working on a city-funded project in Seattle, which will include widespread volunteer-based survey of historic buildings. And do you think there's a use for that app to do that kind of survey work, or do you think there's other options out there that might work for Connie?
Yeah, so I think you kind of bring up a good point. There may be other great survey tools that you can use, such as SurveyMonkey, and there's maybe a half a dozen other really great tools that you can use. But if you wanted to do that through this app, it is possible. That could be a feature that could be added if you rolled out an app with maybe sort of your historical landmarks and wanted to get user feedback about specific landmarks and maybe create a survey inside of the app. That could be done. I think the key is just making sure that whatever tool you do use, that there's a really great way to kind of get the word out there and market it. It looks like it's sort of a volunteer-based survey, but that's something that I'd be happy to discuss with you some more offline if you're looking for some solutions. But yeah, there definitely are a couple of different ways that you could approach that project specifically. Jonathan, I don't know if you
If I could just, if I could just add to that. So if we're doing cultural resources survey work where you're inputting stuff that would be used on DPR forms or National Park Service type forms, I know that Los Angeles has created a tablet, a program that they use on tablets so that people can actually go and use the tablets out in the field. And then that actually translates directly to their overall database when they come in. So they're trying to save several steps between, writing stuff out by hand and then re-entering that into their cultural resources database. So you might want to check, if you haven't already, you probably have, but if you haven't already, check with Janet Hansen over there at the City of Los Angeles and ask her about those programs that they worked on. I believe they were developed by their in-house IT team, and I'm sure she'd be willing to share them.
And I'll add on top of that and just say that there are also plenty of open source tools that we all sort of alluded to in the process, and creating a dynamic website where you can input data into a cloud-based sort of database is much more doable and possible for somebody with less technical knowledge than it was maybe 10 years ago. So it's doable. It does take time, but that's a third option for you. And so there's a thank you to all of us, I guess, or us both. And so any final questions from people? We have about 5 minutes left here if we do have any further questions, so we'll wait. We'll wait a few minutes here to see if anybody has any further questions. Okay, I think we're finishing 5 minutes early. I didn't think that would happen, but thank you to our speakers for keeping us on time, and apologize for the brief sound hiccup there. That was my fault. I accidentally clicked a button. And I'll wait here 20 seconds. It looks like there's some typing going on. Okay, so with that being said, I'm going to move over to our evaluation page. While I'm doing that, I will mention to everybody that we have another program coming up on January 6th, 2016. This will look at the California Historical Building Code and specifically at the Los Angeles Broadway Corridor Reuse Guidelines, which was a creative, flexible way to reuse some Broadway corridor buildings that had some structural issues in Los Angeles. If you'd like to attend this session, you would type in the coupon code CPF Build for $10 off registration, whether you're a member or not a member, but we do encourage you to become a member. And for more information on any future events or any other CPF education programs, you can go to news.californiapreservation.org/events. You'll notice on the left-hand side there's a multiple choice response. Please do fill that out for feedback. We like to hear what you thought of the program. And on the right-hand side there are some qualitative responses. You can type in your suggestions or your comments on the right for us, and we collect that information and share it with the other speakers. So I will mention that if you need to submit the response for the multiple choice by clicking on the Submit Response button, which is actually at the top of the page, though it should be at the bottom. But so once you fill out your responses, you scroll back up to the top and click Submit Response. On the top of the screen are some are the sign-in sheet, the handouts from today, and the upcoming programs. If you're interested in downloading the handouts, you just click on that link and click Browse to. I will thank everybody, and I'm going to turn off the sound now, but I'll leave the screen up. Thanks again to Aaron and Ralph, and have a wonderful rest of the day, and happy holidays to everybody.